And welcome into the State of Purple. Happy Monday, a victory Monday for your Minnesota Vikings. 27-22 victory over those New York Jets. It got a little dicey towards the end. He's Jack Day. I'm AJ Mansour, and we are brought to you by SodaStick and sodastick.com. You can get your Minnesota sports inspired goods. Jack's got one hat on. I've got another hat on. You can see some of the t-shirts if you're watching this visual stream online right now. But you can head over to sodastick.com right now. Perfect time of year to get a Christmas gift for the loved one in your family, your friends, whoever it might be that might be interested in some Minnesota sports inspired goods. And you can take 15% off right now. Promo code KFAN at the checkout. Sodastick.com, promo code KFAN will get you 15% off. Jack Day, how you doing, man?
I'm hanging in there. It was another. I was gonna say this right when we started the show. I legitimately think for maybe outside of the two losses, that with your editing skills, maybe we can just say Jets a bunch of times, and then you can go back to previous episodes and overlay the word Jets over the other team, because it feels like it's been the same exact story in every single game that they've played.
Yeah, it was a little different, and we'll talk about maybe some of the good things that came out of this game, but the concerns remain, right? I mean, the offense wasn't great. Kirk was off. There were opportunities that they didn't take advantage of. The defense gave up 486 yards to the Jets, to Mike White and the Jets, let alone. We'll break down Mike White because I've got an opinion there too, but at the same time, an imperfect team, as we all know, but they continue to win, so we'll take that. At the end of the day, though, we're starting to turn our gaze towards the playoffs. The Vikings' magic number is 1. They defeat the Detroit Lions this weekend in Detroit, and they clinch the division, clinch a home playoff game, and we start to look ahead. Even we're kind of doing that right now. So as we do look ahead, we get a little worried about this team and some of the gray areas, the bad issues that continue to rear their ugly head, Jack. Tell me what stuck out to you that you didn't like yesterday in that New York Jets game.
Yeah, I think you can combine the last 2 weeks together when I talk about the one thing that really stuck out, and I'm sure if you anyone who watched the game, this is what stuck out to them as well. The Vikings have allowed 751 yards through the air to Mike White and Mac Jones. If you were to tell me that before those two games, I think you and I both probably would have expected that the outcomes of those games would have ended a little bit differently. But here we are talking about, I want to say the same old Vikings, the same old 2022 Vikings, because that's not the case for the Vikings. But the good news for this team is there are some reinforcements coming there. I think Cameron Dancer said last week that he's expected to be elevated from the IR this week and to play against Detroit. Again, we'll monitor that and talk a little bit more about that particular situation when we get into the Lions game and break that down a little bit more. But I think that has to be the biggest concern. I think Delvin Tomlinson coming back, it beefed up that interior, the defensive line, the run game. Outside of, I think there was like a 48-yard run. Outside of that, I felt pretty comfortable about the Vikings run defense, But again, they weren't playing against Breece Hall or even Michael Carter. These were the third and fourth string running backs on the Jets. So I think the defense is concerning. Red zone defense was really the only positive. I think we could be potentially even having a different conversation right now. Maybe it doesn't turn out to be the same game if Cam Bynum doesn't run into a Caleb Evans and lets him get his first career interception. But I think that's the clear one, at least the most obvious for me, especially not, like I said, not just because of the Jets game, but because of the last two games. And I think when we start looking ahead to the playoffs, I was just thinking about this, and being a Vikings follower, I think the first thing that goes to my mind is like, how far can this team go? And when you start thinking about some of the quarterbacks in the NFL and you think about a potential Super Bowl matchup, say the Vikings go through the NFC and they make the Super Bowl, they're going to be looking at potentially a Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow, people that are dicing up defenses across the NFL. And the Vikings just got diced up, like I said, from Mac Jones and someone named Mike White. So I think that's got to be the biggest concern.
Right, and that worry still exists. But at the end of the day, there's still this opportunity when you look at the league and you say there's no dominant team. There really isn't. Even the Chiefs this weekend look susceptible to a tough defense, to some problems. They ended up losing that game. I think in the last was it two? I forget what the exact stat was. Maybe the last calendar year or something along those lines. In the year 2022, the Chiefs have lost to the Bengals 3 times. Again, the last 3 games they've played, however you want to look at that or wherever that falls on the calendar, they've lost those last 3 games. So there's a way to every one of these teams. The Eagles have blemishes. The Cowboys are not perfect. There are teams that are better than other teams, clearly, right? There's some teams like the Vikings who need to figure things out if they want to compete to it. But at the end of the situation, when the season ends, you're going to have a conversation about the Vikings being a dangerous team, being able to compete with everybody. And now we've seen, again, Jack, that they are battle-tested. I wrote about it this morning. The Vikings battle-tested style of play is getting them ready for the playoffs. And what I mean by that is, these close games, now 9-0 on the season in one-score games. That's what the playoffs are. Tough, close games, and they know how to finish them. They know how to win them. They've won them on offense. They've won them on defense. They've finished games when they need to. Bend, don't break, all these things that we talk about. But at the end of the day, they're finding a way to win these games, and that's what really matters. So then you have the opportunity where you look at the defenses that they faced. I heard Ben Lieber say this morning, once they face the Colts 2 weeks, or just about 2 weeks from now, the Minnesota Vikings will have faced 6 of the top 10 defenses in the entire league. You look at the Commanders and remember what that front looked like, that physical front and the pressure they put on Kirk Cousins. You look at the Jets this last weekend and the speed and the physicality that they hit you with across the middle, in the backfield, wherever it is. Those are good defenses that the Vikings are learning how to figure out. It's not perfect. They're not running up and down and scoring millions of points on them, but throughout the game, they figure it out. That third and fourth quarter, we'll break it down a little bit more, was a great example. Didn't go well in the third. They figured it out in the fourth in a way to take this game to the next level. And when they get to the playoffs, these are the situations, these are the scenarios that will help them be more prepared for the style of football as it shifts from regular season football into playoff football. So that's one silver lining. What else did you like from the game yesterday? I'm sure we can talk a lot about what we didn't like, but what did you like?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite plays from yesterday, and this stems from, we can start with the negative, because Kirk Cousins didn't seem like himself yesterday. There was a couple throws. I think the biggest one was TJ Hawkinson was wide open for 30, 40, maybe a 50-yard plus gain, and Kirk just floated it over him, and it felt like he was floating footballs. It didn't seem like he was trying to. There's a couple out routes where he floated it over, and again, we're not in the huddles. We don't know if that's a miscommunication with the wide receivers or if the Jets cornerbacks were potentially getting their hands on their jerseys and getting them out their routes. But my favorite play from yesterday's game was, I don't even know if it was necessarily a huge reason for the Vikings winning this game. I don't remember exactly what down it was either, but it's a perfect example of the Kirk Cousins that we're seeing in 2022. It's not something that we're used to seeing. And my favorite play, maybe in my lifetime of watching Kirk Cousins, and I'll say, this, most people that are regulars that watch this show know that I've been a Kirk Cousins truther, but we haven't seen this from Kirk Cousins. And I'm not going to sit here and say I want him to continue doing this, because that's not the case, but scrambling, and then not only scrambling, but lowering his shoulder against a starting linebacker in the NFL, CJ Mosley. I saw that and I was like, this is a different Kirk. That proves it right there. And if you're still trying to argue that Kirk Cousins hasn't been on a different level this year, I don't think that's fair anymore, because we have now seen all of these narratives. He won a primetime game last week. The locker room seems to love him. He seems like he's a great leader. And now he's going out there and he's putting his body on the line. And I think that was a cool moment. And I don't know if that was necessarily something that stuck out to you as much as it did to me, but watching it on TV, I was like, okay, this is a team that can do some damage in the playoffs, because they have a quarterback now that is willing to go to battle for everyone in that locker room. And he proved that on Sunday.
Yeah, I think it stuck out to everybody, because he not only won that battle, he knocked Mosley backwards. I mean, it wasn't a situation of him just toughing it out to get that first down. He lowered the hammer and knocked Mosley, who outweighs him, out-toughs him, all these things, backwards a full yard. And that did definitely stand out. And when you talk about Kirk Cousins taking the next step, And the next step doesn't always mean your statistics improve. It doesn't always mean that you're compared to your competitors a better player. What that might mean is that you're winning football games and you figured out how to win. And maybe part of figuring out how to win is understanding that you don't need to throw 90% completion percentage for lots of yards and lots of touchdowns, because there's other ways to win. There's other ways to do this. I'm not going to fault anything that this team is doing right now. Right, we can nitpick some stuff, but when it comes to Kirk Cousins and the way that he has, we could sit here and say he's got the lowest passer rating of his career, which he does as a starter. But you look at it further and you say he's got 10 wins out of 12 games. And there is some narrative and some similarities to the way that they win. Scoring first is a big thing for this team. They're now 8-0 when they score first. They, lead the league when in points scored first in the game. All these things that kind of factor in and help them control this situation. You do have a team that is bonded in a unique way. You have a team that is rolling in a unique way. You have a player in Kirk and Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook and Eric Kendricks and Harrison Smith, who some of them are revitalized. We thought maybe this is going to be over the hill for a guy like Harrison Smith, but he found a way to do this. Patrick Peterson, same way. So again, I'm not going to sit here and say that this team can't win. They're doing it unconventionally, right? We may want to see them blow out and get a little more confidence heading into the playoffs, but they're winning games, and I'm not going to complain about that. Greg Joseph was a silver lining too. 5 for 5 yesterday, had a 50-yard field goal that was good. He had no extra points missed. We wanted to kick him off the team last week. I think we'll keep him a little longer. What we need to see, though, Jack, is him to build on this and have another perfect week next week. Hopefully then you're over these little yips. You can get that confidence back, but you do need to build on it. 1 week is not good enough. Would you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And that's actually funny that you bring that up. I was going to try to avoid talking about the kicking situation as much as I could. But again, you've said this several times on the show. We are a Vikings podcast, and quite frankly, we cannot get away with not talking about the kicking situation. But I was watching the game with my dad yesterday, and I was trying something a little bit new. Whenever the Vikings scored a touchdown, normal claps, a little bit of cheering, but I was going absolutely berserk every time Greg Joseph made an extra point, and he will attest to that. I was cheering harder for the extra points, and it's
kind of like the Bronx clap, right? The sarcastic, over-the-top cheering for the thing that should be just a given.
But I did want to say, finishing up on Kirk Cousins too, the narrative with Kirk has always been garbage time. That's why he has the stats. It's because he's down 14 to 21 points in the fourth quarter and he's going up against prevent defenses. That narrative has also been completely shattered this year because, like you said, the Vikings are 9-0 in one-score games, and I believe this number could be wrong. I think it's 4 or 5, but 4 or 5 of those games have been fourth quarter comeback victories for your starting quarterback of the Minnesota Vikings. So he's debunking some narratives. Again, the stats aren't there. And we say the stats aren't there. I think he's still statistically, in terms of touchdowns and yards and everything, I think he's still in the top 10 or at least right around the top 10. And he's, like we've said, it seems like he's taken the step back statistically, but as a leader, he's really stepped forward, and he's just playing a different style of football that might not look as pretty to the eye, but I think anyone can argue that it's more entertaining to watch.
What did you think of the little Twitter spat that JD or DJ Reed and Justin Jefferson found themselves in after the game?
Yeah, that was entertaining. I retweeted Justin Jefferson's tweet because I thought it was amusing. I was feeling myself yesterday for some reason. I was like on Twitter, and I was close to getting to a point where I know if I would have tweeted some stuff out, it would have had some backlash from our friends across the border, I think, a little bit. And we can get into that a little bit later. But I thought it was funny. It's entertaining because Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in football right now. I mean, I don't think there's really, you can make the arguments because there's different style wide receivers that people like, but right. I think you can't really escape the fact of the matter is that Justin Jefferson is at least a top 3 wide receiver right now. And yeah, they held him to 45 yards and a touchdown, but that touchdown was a critical touchdown that DJ Reed let up. And there's a picture going around Twitter where he's kind of sitting down, kind of sulking, and Justin Jefferson's throwing the ball to the side about to hit the gritty. So it was funny. And I think Justin's clap back at him was perfect, saying, hey, if you want to tweet this stuff about me, tell your coach you want to guard me one-on-one, because we heard, and again, I haven't gone back to the all 22 yet and confirmed or denied this, but Justin Jefferson was claiming in his tweet that they were doing some bracket coverage and he had some safety help. And all throughout this season so far, we've heard how good the secondary is, especially with Sauce Gardner on the other side. And again, they kept Justin Jefferson in check for the most part. They kept Kirk Cousins in check for the most part, but at the end of the day, the Vikings still won. And I think there were a couple throws that I think could have gotten Justin Jefferson, maybe not quite to 100 yards, but he would have been close if Kirk would have delivered on a couple of throws that I think we're used to him seeing make. So it was entertaining, but hopefully that locker room and Justin Jefferson can put that behind him and switch the focus to Detroit, which I don't think they're going to have a problem with doing.
Right, and it sounds like this safety coverage was something that was corroborated by Adam Thielen today on the power trip as well. Just kind of laughing, saying, "Hey, when you watch the film, you're gonna see maybe the impact that Justin had without catching the football, but opening up some things, pulling coverage over to his side." That touchdown was interesting because he was in motion and he moved from Sauce Gardner's side over to Reed's side and ended up scoring that touchdown. You also have the dropped pass. This might be one of the ones that was an errant throw to a little behind him. That was a big yardage gain that would have got him up near 70 yards probably on that one alone. And then there were two opportunities where I think there was a defensive pass interference or a holding on one was on Reed and one was on Gardner. So you have these other situations where positive yardage plays or positive impact plays for Justin Jefferson that didn't necessarily account for yards in the stat book. But when you look at it, 4 catches, 45 yards and 1 touchdown, it felt like he had a lot more of an impact on this football game than he actually did. They had him in that weird little double pass scenario. They were going to throw back to Dalvin Cook on a screen and it didn't work out.
Watching that live, what did you think was going to happen? Because when I was watching it, we were like, was he trying to throw that back to Kirk? And then Kirk was going to, you couldn't see if there was anyone else downfield or not, or if what the play was developing.
So one of the replays we got in the stadium, it showed what it was. And it was a screen pass back to the other side of the field to Dalvin Cook. You saw very clearly there were, I think, 3, maybe 4 linemen out there and Dalvin Cook. And one of the linemen had his defender just kind of get in the middle of Dalvin and the pass to make it not able to be a smart throw. And honestly, the headiness of Jefferson to not just force that. You know, Randy Moss used to do these things and they get a little goofy and he'd force it in there because he doesn't get his chance to throw and he doesn't have the decision making, you know, that a normal quarterback does. But Jefferson made a good decision not to throw that back there. But it was a reverse, whatever, double pass screen, whatever you want to call it, to Dalvin Cook on the backside. And they're outside of the one defender. There were 3 more offensive linemen there that had not locked up on anybody yet. So if they could have gotten it to him, it would have been a good gain. Turns out Jefferson scrambles, makes it a positive play, but it could have been disastrous too. But he had that. He had the jet sweep. He was impactful throughout this game. The MVP chance came down, raining down on him after he scored that touchdown in the fourth quarter. But that fourth quarter drive was massive, Jack. It was massive because you're coming on the heels of a third quarter where your offense had 10 plays for 10 positive yards. Just fell asleep, couldn't do it, 3 and out, extra play here, whatever. You have these scenarios where they continue to fall asleep in the third quarter. The Jets defense started feeling themselves, bringing pressure, getting in the backfield, really shutting things down. And it felt like the tide was turning a little bit. And then all of a sudden, in the fourth quarter, that opening drive for the Vikings, they go 7 plays, 75 yards. Again, 10 plays, 10 yards in the entirety of the third quarter. And the first drive of that fourth quarter for them was 7 plays, 75 yards, and a touchdown that ended up being the winning touchdown. The difference in the game, you had that there. It was huge. The timeliness of it, the way that they adapted and were able to get things going. After that, it was kind of the Jets had the ball the rest of the fourth quarter, you know, for a couple different drives to put some points on the board and then fight for those fourth down conversions, one of which they got, 2 of which they didn't. And those ended up being the determination in the game, that close one on the goal line, and then that fourth down interception to seal the victory for the Vikings. But that third quarter continues to be crazy. And I don't know why. I just don't.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I think we could kind of edit this out and kind of have the same conversation that we've had in a few of these podcasts by now, but there were a couple more silver linings as well that I think we should at least quickly address. The Vikings don't win that game yesterday without Dalvin Cook and Alexander Mattison. And to take that one step further, even the offensive line, they were opening up some holes, and it early on this season, it felt like it really seemed like they were running Dalvin Cook into the backs of their offensive linemen a little bit, just kind of trying to get him at the middle. Kind of going away from what we were used to seeing Dalvin Cook be so good at. And it kind of seems like they're starting to find ways to get him more in space. That can still mean in between the tackles, but they're finding ways to get some explosive plays out of Dalvin Cook, and that's only going to open up this offense even further down the road. So I think that's exciting. And then flipping to the other side of the ball, although there weren't a ton of positives in this one, I think a silver lining that can be taken from this one was the performance of Patrick Jones II. There's not a ton to be excited for long term in terms of the Vikings pass rushing situation. I know Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith have both been very good this year, and I think they'll be good for a couple years to come, but they're both approaching father time a little bit. I'll say that nicely. And it's good seeing the Vikings coaching staff be so comfortable with, I mean, they're rotating guys on that defensive line in and out throughout the entire game, and they're getting more and more comfortable doing that and letting it be DJ Wanham and Patrick Jones on the edges. And I've been more impressed by Patrick Jones II this year, I think, than DJ Wanham, who has had his ups and downs for the Vikings in the last couple seasons. But those were a couple more silver linings that I took away from this one, and I think that's a big positive at one of the most important positions on the football field.
Yeah, you have another player too that could be a silver lining or a marred tarnish mark on this game in Duke Shelley, who came in the situation when Caleb Evans got another concussion situation, initially cleared and then reported concussion symptoms afterwards to get that opportunity. So Duke Shelley comes in, has 2 or 3 big plays, pass breakups, these opportunities where he comes in right away, makes his presence felt, and then later in the game, he was responsible for one of those. I think it was the Garrett Wilson catch across the middle, where it looked like he was there. He could have, knocked the ball out. He could have made the tackle. Ends up just hitting Garrett Wilson. Didn't wrap him up.
That might have been Chandon Sullivan.
Was that Chandon Sullivan? Okay.
I could be wrong on that.
I don't want to disparage him.
I remember getting upset that Chandon Sullivan on a Garrett Wilson missed tackle, and was it the one that was like right in the middle of the field and he just kind of hit him and fell off of him? I'm pretty sure
there was a handful of those.
That's also true.
I know that Shelley was responsible for one of them. Maybe it wasn't the big one, but you're right. Chandon Sullivan. There was the Bam Knight run to the outside. Just these situations that even the goal line stand, when they had the goal line stand and they get him in the backfield, they get to knock him back 3 yards, wrap him up at the 5-yard line. He slips out of the tackle and gets back to the line of scrimmage for no gain. That made a difference, and ultimately it didn't get them in the end zone. But from a run from the 5-yard line is very different from a second chance from the 1-yard line. Thankfully, they were able to hold, but there was some tackling situations. There was some concerns there. The soft spot in the middle of the defense behind the linebackers continues to exist. I don't know what to do about it or whose fault it is, but they're going to go hit the tape today, and they're going to figure out what they did wrong, because they do have a game against a dangerous Detroit Lions team that put a 40 spot up on the Jacksonville Jaguars this weekend.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to talking about that, but this was kind of the final thought that I wanted to have, and this is keeping in the NFC North, but not necessarily Vikings related. So I wanted to get this out there, get it off my chest a little bit, and let me vent to you, because I think you'll appreciate it a little bit. But if you recall, I think it was about a year ago that Justin Jefferson was, I believe he was named, and I could be wrong on this, not 100% sure, but I think it was like Offensive Player of the Month for the month of November last year. And I just remember seeing all over Twitter, hang the banner. And now we're a year removed from that. And I think it's very, very funny to me that we're in a situation where the Green Bay Packers do not have a chance at winning the NFC North. And now all of a sudden they have a wide receiver.
They're not eliminated yet.
Are they not eliminated from the North?
There's a weird scenario where they have to win out, and maybe they are eliminated from the North, but not the playoffs.
I think
weird scenario. They have to win out, and then the Colts have to beat the Giants, and then they can squeeze in. But that might just be for the wild card spot. You're right.
And again, I'll say this too. I'm not trying to take anything away from Christian Watson, because he's starting to ball out, and it's not entertaining as a Vikings follower seeing that, especially given the Vikings traded the Packers that pick. But I just find it a little bit funny that now that he's finding some success, I've kind of crept around Twitter a little bit and gone onto some Packers Twitter accounts, and it really seems like they're pretty excited across the border about this young up-and-coming wide receiver. And I just wanted to say congratulations. Go hang your banner and enjoy it this year, because it's the Vikings division to lose right now, and have fun with your wide receiver that scored 8 touchdowns in the last 4 weeks.
And
excuse me.
Potentially no quarterback to throw the ball next year. We'll see. We shall see. But yes, it is. They're not at the mindset that the Packers have the ability to make this run because they've done it before. That's where they're hanging their hat on this hope, and this is their savior, Christian Watson, who's coming in and doing these things too. It's been a very impressive month for Christian Watson.
Agreed.
But it's been a month. It's been a month, and the rest of the league is going to finish the ability to catch up to them. Who have they played? Let me look this up real quick. Green Bay.
And it's weird too, because I was also told, I've been told this on Twitter, that Justin Jefferson, he's only been in the league for 1 year now. You can't compare him to Keenan Allen, and now it's really weird all of a sudden that it's Christian Watson's in the same category as, again, I'm not saying that all Packers fans are saying Christian Watson is Justin Jefferson or Randy Moss, but there's names that are also being thrown around there that I think are a little bit premature. If we were a little bit premature to rightfully say that Justin Jefferson was a top 3 wide receiver, and now that is confirmed.
Right. So they've done it against the Bears, who are the Bears. The Eagles in a or Watson has done it, let's say, in a high-scoring game where there was basically no defense. The Titans, that was a lower-scoring game. I guess their defense is okay. Cowboys game, that big comeback, there was really no defense there. Then they lost to the Lions and they lost to the Bills. So, I mean, that's kind of the span, that month span where he blew up and had the 8 touchdowns. And 8 touchdowns is crazy, right? They're using him in every facet of the game. It was a run this week, I believe, right? Some sort of end around or something where they gave him the ball and he ran it in. They're finding ways to use him. That's great, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I know he's going to be a good player in this league, and for their sake, they're hoping that he's going to be a great player in this league. But there's a situation here, right? No one's really taking the Packers seriously, despite Aaron Rodgers and still being in the picture. Those games get out of hand. Even the comeback against the Dallas Cowboys, it was kind of like, hey, let's call the dogs off, and then they start scoring points, and they're back in this thing. Now Dallas is reeling, and they end up going, was that to overtime, I believe? So it is what it is. We're happy for you, but at the we're still in a situation where the season is the way that the season is, and it's going to end sooner rather than later for the Packers. So,
but they got their banner, so
they got their banner, right? You gave them, you designed it, you hung it, you embroidered it, whatever it looks like. You, Jack Day, Betsy Ross, all these situations, have these opportunities for these wonderful pieces of art, and this is one of them. So congratulations, Green Bay Packers, and thanks, Jack Day. Let's wrap this up here. We'll talk later this week as we preview that Detroit game a little bit more. But a reminder, you can find old episodes of the State of Purple podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Thanks to everybody who joins in these live streams too. It's a fun opportunity to get your feedback and kind of use some of those information pieces that you guys are throwing at us in the show as well. So Scolger29, John Hinnenkamp, you guys were all over the chat today. Thanks for taking part in that. And thanks to SodaStick for sponsoring this show. 15% off with the promo code KFAN at sodastick.com. And thanks to my 4-year-old who is apparently begging for crackers right now. So I'm going to go get him crackers. Jack, you get back to work, and we'll talk later this week as we preview the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions on the State of Purple podcast. We'll see you later.